Look, I'm going to tell you something that most married men will never admit out loud. Not to their wives, not to their friends, not even to themselves in the quiet darkness of 3 a.m. when sleep won't come. They feel trapped. Completely, utterly, suffocatingly trapped. And the worst part? They signed up for it with a smile on their face, a ring in their pocket, and absolutely no idea what they were walking into. This isn't about hating marriage or women or commitment. This is about a philosophical truth that Schopenhauer understood better than almost anyone. A truth so uncomfortable that society has built an entire industry around pretending it doesn't exist. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will change how you see every married couple you encounter for the rest of your life. Here's what nobody tells you before you say those 2 words that change everything. Marriage isn't the happy ending they sold you in movies. It's not the completion of your journey as a man. It's the beginning of a very specific type of imprisonment, one so sophisticated that the prisoner often doesn't even realize he's locked up until years have passed, and he wakes up one morning wondering where the hell his life went. Schopenhauer called this the will to life, this blind biological drive that pushes men toward marriage and family, not because it makes them happy, but because nature doesn't care about your happiness. Nature cares about reproduction, about continuing the species, and it uses your desires, your romantic feelings, your sexual drive as a tool to trap you into a situation that serves its purposes, not yours. Think about the actual mechanics of how this happens. A man meets a woman. The chemistry is electric, the sex is incredible. She laughs at his jokes, supports his dreams, makes him feel like the most important person in the world. He thinks he's found his soulmate, his partner, the one person who truly understands him. What he doesn't realize is that he's experiencing a temporary state, a chemical cocktail of dopamine and oxytocin and testosterone that evolution designed specifically to override his rational thinking. His brain is literally being hijacked by biology, and everyone around him is cheering it on. His friends congratulate him. His family asks when he's going to propose. Society presents marriage as the ultimate achievement, the final proof that he's a real man, a successful human being. So he proposes. She says yes. They plan the wedding, spending thousands of dollars on a single day that's supposed to represent their eternal love. And here's where the trap really springs shut. Because the moment that ring goes on her finger, the moment those vows are spoken, everything changes. Not immediately. It's subtle at first. But the woman he married slowly, inevitably becomes someone different. Or maybe she doesn't change at all. Maybe she was always this person, and the version he fell in love with was the performance, the audition, the carefully curated presentation designed to secure commitment. Schopenhauer understood this better than the romantics ever could. He saw that sexual love, what we call romance, is nothing more than the species manipulating individuals into reproducing. The man thinks he's choosing a partner based on love and compatibility. In reality, his attraction is being shaped by evolutionary imperatives he doesn't even understand. He's drawn to physical features that indicate fertility and health. He's attracted to behaviors that suggest she'll be a good mother to his children. None of this is about his happiness. None of this is about creating a fulfilling life for him as an individual. It's all about tricking him into continuing the species, and marriage is the institution that locks this trap in place. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't about blaming women. Women are caught in the same trap, just from a different angle. They're following their biological programming just like men are. The difference is that society has created an entire framework that benefits from keeping men specifically unaware of what's happening to them. We celebrate the bride. We throw bachelor parties that are basically funerals for a man's freedom. We make jokes about the old ball and chain, and we laugh, but underneath that laughter is a deep, uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to examine too closely. The married man wakes up one day, maybe 5 years in, maybe 10, and he realizes his entire life has been reorganized around someone else's needs and expectations. His free time isn't really free. His money isn't really his. His decisions require consultation, negotiation, approval. The hobbies he loved, they're selfish now. The friends he had, They make her uncomfortable, or they're a bad influence, or they take time away from the family. The career ambitions he pursued, they need to be balanced against her career, her needs, the children's schedules, the household responsibilities that somehow always need his attention exactly when he's trying to do something for himself. And here's the really insidious part, the part that Schopenhauer would recognize immediately as the will to life tightening its grip. The man can't complain about any of this. If he expresses frustration, he's being childish. If he wants time alone, he's being distant. If he misses his old life, he's not committed to his family. Society has created a perfect system where the prisoner isn't allowed to acknowledge the bars of his cage. He's supposed to be grateful. He's supposed to feel fulfilled. He's supposed to find complete satisfaction in providing and protecting and sacrificing every single day for the rest of his life. Talk to married men when their wives aren't around. Really talk to them. Ask them about the last time they did something purely for themselves, without having to justify it, or negotiate it or feel guilty about it. Watch their faces. You'll see something flicker in their eyes, a kind of resigned sadness that they've learned to bury so deep that even they forget it's there most of the time. They'll laugh it off. They'll say that's just what marriage is. That's what being a man means. That's what responsibility looks like. But Schopenhauer would recognize that laugh for what it really is. The sound of someone who's stopped fighting against their chains. The financial trap is particularly brilliant in its construction. Marriage legally binds your economic fate to another person. Your income becomes household income. Your debt becomes shared debt. Your financial decisions require agreement from someone whose spending habits and priorities might be completely different from yours. And if the marriage ends, you're looking at losing half of everything you've built, plus ongoing financial obligations that could last for years or decades. The system is designed to make leaving more painful than staying, which means men endure situations they would never tolerate in any other context, simply because the cost of escape is too high. But it's not just about money. The social trap is equally powerful. Divorce carries a stigma, especially for men. You're seen as a failure, as someone who couldn't make it work, as someone who abandoned his family. Never mind the reality of the situation. Never mind whether staying was actually destroying you as a person. Society judges the man who leaves far more harshly than it judges the man who stays and suffers in silence. So men stay. They endure. They convince themselves that this is normal, that this is what adult life is supposed to feel like, that everyone else is just better at hiding their misery. Schopenhauer argued that life is essentially suffering, that satisfaction is always temporary and desire is always renewed. Marriage embodies this perfectly. There's no end point where everything is finally resolved and you can rest. There's always another need, another expectation, another problem to solve. The wife needs emotional support. The children need attention and resources. The house needs maintenance. The in-laws need to be managed. The social obligations need to be fulfilled. It never stops. The treadmill never slows down. And the man runs on it day after day, year after year, wondering when he'll finally reach that promised land of marital bliss that everyone told him was waiting just around the corner. Here's what makes this particularly tragic from a philosophical standpoint. The man isn't even pursuing his own desires anymore. He's pursuing the avoidance of conflict. He's pursuing the maintenance of peace in his household. He's pursuing the meeting of expectations that were set by people and institutions that don't care about his individual happiness. His entire existence becomes reactive rather than proactive. He's not building the life he wants. He's managing the life that marriage has created for him. And sex, the very thing that often leads men into marriage in the first place, becomes another source of frustration and resentment. What was once passionate and spontaneous becomes scheduled and obligatory. It becomes something his wife controls, something she grants or withholds based on her mood, her stress level, how well he's performed his other duties as a husband. The sexual dynamic shifts from mutual desire to transactional exchange. He does the dishes, takes out the trash, says the right things, performs emotional labor, and maybe, if he's lucky, if the stars align, if she's not too tired, he gets sex. And he's supposed to be grateful for this arrangement. Schopenhauer would recognize this as the will to life completing its mission. Once reproduction has occurred, Once the biological imperative has been satisfied, the intense sexual attraction that brought the couple together begins to fade. Nature doesn't need them to desire each other anymore. It's moved on to the next generation, but the couple is still legally and socially bound together, now with far less of the passion that made the bond tolerable in the first place. They're stuck in a contract that was signed under the influence of biological forces that no longer apply. The emotional trap might be the most sophisticated of all. Men are taught that their feelings don't matter, that expressing vulnerability is weakness, that their job is to be strong and stoic and reliable. So when a married man feels trapped, when he feels the walls closing in, when he lies awake at night wondering if this is really all there is, he has no outlet for those feelings. He can't talk to his wife about it because she'll be hurt and angry. He can't talk to his male friends because they're all pretending everything is fine too. He can't talk to a therapist without his wife wanting to know what he's saying. So he suffers alone, in silence, building up years of unexpressed frustration and resentment that eventually either explodes or calcifies into a kind of emotional numbness. Think about what society expects from a married man. He's supposed to be a provider, bringing in money consistently and reliably. He's supposed to be a protector, keeping his family safe from harm. He's supposed to be an emotional support system, helping his wife process her feelings and deal with her stress. He's supposed to be a father, present and engaged with his children. He's supposed to be a handyman, maintaining the house and fixing things when they break. He's supposed to be a social coordinator, showing up to family events and community obligations. He's supposed to be a friend, maintaining couple friendships with other married couples. And he's supposed to do all of this while also somehow maintaining his own physical health, his own mental well-being, his own sense of identity and purpose. It's an impossible standard. Nobody can actually meet all these expectations all the time. But the married man tries anyway because the alternative is admitting that he's failing, that he's not man enough, that he can't handle what every other married man supposedly handles just fine. So he pushes himself harder. He works longer hours. He says yes when he wants to say no. He swallows his frustration and his exhaustion and his growing sense that he's being slowly erased as an individual. And everyone applauds him for it. Everyone tells him he's a good husband, a good father, a good man. Nobody asks if he's happy. Nobody asks what he wants. Nobody asks if this life is actually fulfilling for him. By the way, I'm curious. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where my fellow truth seekers are located around the world. Schopenhauer believed that recognizing the nature of suffering was the first step toward wisdom. Most people spend their lives running from this recognition, distracting themselves with pleasures and achievements and relationships. But the wise person looks directly at the reality of existence and accepts it for what it is. Marriage, in this framework, is one of the primary illusions that people use to avoid confronting the essential emptiness of life. They think that finding the right partner will complete them, will make them whole, will finally provide the lasting satisfaction they've been seeking. But it doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. Because the problem isn't that they haven't found the right relationship. The problem is that they're looking for external solutions to internal voids. The married man who feels trapped is actually closer to philosophical truth than the newlywed who's convinced he's found eternal happiness. The trapped man has seen through the illusion. He's recognized that marriage didn't solve his existential problems. It just gave him new ones to manage. But he can't act on this recognition because he's too deep in the system. He has children who depend on him. He has financial obligations. He has social expectations. He has built an entire life structure that would collapse if he admitted what he really feels. So he does what most men do. He compartmentalizes. He finds small escapes, small pleasures, small ways to feel like himself again, even if just for a moment. The really devastating part about this trap is how it rewrites your past. The married man who feels trapped starts to look back at his single years with a mix of nostalgia and regret that borders on grief. He remembers the freedom, the possibilities, the sense that his life was still unwritten and full of potential. He remembers making decisions based purely on what he wanted, not on what a dozen other people needed from him. And he realizes that he traded all of that for a promise that turned out to be mostly illusion. The companionship isn't as constant as advertised. The partnership isn't as equal as promised. The happiness isn't as enduring as guaranteed. What he got instead was responsibility, obligation, and a life that feels increasingly like it belongs to someone else. Schopenhauer wrote extensively about the nature of desire and how it perpetually renews itself. You achieve one goal, and immediately your mind creates a new desire, a new lack, a new source of suffering. Marriage accelerates this process exponentially. You get married, thinking that's the achievement. Then you need to buy a house. Then you need to have children. Then you need to advance your career to support the family. Then you need a bigger house. Then you need to save for college. Then you need to plan for retirement. The goalposts never stop moving. The finish line never arrives. And the married man runs this race until he literally dies, never actually reaching a point where he can stop and just exist without needing to do or achieve or provide something else. The psychological warfare of modern marriage is particularly brutal for men. They're expected to be emotionally available, but not emotional. They're supposed to be sensitive to their wife's needs, but not needy themselves. They're supposed to be confident leaders, but also egalitarian partners. They're supposed to be passionate lovers, but also respectful and never pressuring. These are contradictory demands that create a no-win situation. No matter what the man does, he's getting it wrong in some way, failing to meet some expectation, disappointing someone who matters to him. This constant state of low-grade failure erodes his sense of self-worth over time, making him increasingly dependent on external validation that becomes harder and harder to obtain. Think about how the narrative changes once you're married. When you're single and dating, you're supposed to pursue, to chase, to win over the woman you desire. Your masculine energy, your ambition, your drive, these are all celebrated as attractive qualities. But the moment you're married, those same qualities become problems. Now you're too focused on work. Now you're not present enough at home. Now your ambitions are selfish. The very traits that made you attractive become the flaws she wants to fix. And you're supposed to accept this transformation gracefully, to understand that growth means becoming someone fundamentally different from who you were when she chose you. Schopenhauer understood that the self is not a fixed entity, but a battlefield of competing drives and impulses. The married man experiences this acutely. Part of him wants to be a good husband and father, to fulfill his responsibilities, to be the man society says he should be. Another part of him resents every moment of this life, yearns for freedom, fantasizes about escape. These parts war with each other constantly, creating an internal tension that never fully resolves. He can't fully embrace being married because part of him hates it. He can't fully pursue his own desires because part of him feels guilty about them. He's stuck in a permanent state of psychological conflict that wears him down day by day. The sexual marketplace dynamics shift dramatically after marriage in ways that disadvantage men specifically. Before marriage, both parties are negotiating from relatively equal positions. She can leave if she's unhappy. He can leave if he's unhappy. But after marriage, especially after children, the power dynamic shifts decisively. She can initiate divorce and typically keep the children, the house, and a significant portion of his income. He can initiate divorce and lose all of those things while still maintaining the financial obligations. This asymmetry creates a situation where the woman holds most of the cards, and both parties know it, even if nobody says it out loud. The wise woman doesn't need to threaten. The mere existence of this power imbalance changes how the man navigates the relationship. I've talked to countless married men who describe a phenomenon they can't quite articulate. They say they feel like they're constantly walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring their wife's mood, constantly adjusting their behavior to avoid conflict. They're not living their lives. They're managing a temperamental system that could blow up at any moment over seemingly minor triggers. Did he put the dishes away wrong? Did he forget to ask about her day before talking about his? Did he spend too long on his phone? Did he not spend enough time engaging with the children? The rules are unwritten, constantly changing, and violations are met with emotional withdrawal, criticism, or extended cold wars that poison the atmosphere of the entire household. Schopenhauer would recognize this as another manifestation of the will, the blind striving that characterizes all existence. The wife isn't consciously trying to make her husband miserable. She's following her own biological and psychological programming, seeking security, stability, emotional connection, validation. But her pursuit of these things often directly conflicts with what would make her husband happy or fulfilled. And because the marriage structure gives her leverage that she didn't have before the commitment, she can pursue her needs more aggressively, while he has to become more accommodating. It's not a conspiracy. It's just the natural result of how the incentive structures work. Once legal and social bonds replace the voluntary nature of the relationship, the friendship dynamics change too, in ways that slowly isolate the married man. His single friends start to seem immature or unreliable, or like bad influences. His wife doesn't like certain friends, finds others annoying, feels uncomfortable with the activities they do together. Gradually, often without any explicit demands, the married man's social circle shrinks. He sees his friends less often. The friendships become shallower, limited to occasional surface-level interactions rather than the deep bonds that used to sustain him. Meanwhile, his wife maintains her friendships, her support network, her emotional outlets. She has people she can talk to, confide in, vent to. He has nobody, because men aren't supposed to need that kind of support. And even if they did, their wife is supposed to be enough. But she's not enough. She can't be enough. No single person can meet all of another person's emotional, intellectual, social, and sexual needs. It's an impossible standard. Yet marriage sells itself on exactly this premise. Find your other half, your soulmate, your person, and they'll complete you. Then reality sets in, and both parties discover that they're still fundamentally alone, still carrying their own existential burdens, still searching for meaning and purpose and satisfaction. Except now they're alone together, unable to fully express their disappointment, because doing so would mean admitting that the entire premise of their marriage was flawed from the beginning. The midlife crisis that men experience is really just this trap becoming fully conscious. For years, decades even, the man has been running on autopilot, following the script, meeting expectations, suppressing doubts. Then something happens. Maybe he turns 40. Maybe he has a health scare. Maybe someone close to him dies. Maybe his children grow up and leave. Suddenly, he's confronted with the reality that his life is finite, that time is running out, and he's spent most of it living for other people rather than for himself. The panic that sets in isn't about buying a sports car or chasing younger women. It's about the horrifying recognition that he traded his one precious life for a bargain that didn't deliver what was promised. Schopenhauer argued that life is like a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. You're either suffering because your needs aren't met, or you're bored because they are. Marriage illustrates this perfectly. When things are bad, when there's conflict or distance or resentment, the man suffers actively. When things are good, when everything is stable and calm, he's often just bored, going through the motions of a life that has lost its vitality and excitement. There's no sustained happiness, no lasting satisfaction. There's just the endless oscillation between different forms of dissatisfaction, and he's committed to experiencing this oscillation for the rest of his life. The lie at the heart of marriage is that commitment equals security, and security equals happiness. But security, real security, is impossible in human relationships. People change, feelings change, circumstances change. The woman you married at 25 is not the same person at 35 or 45. You're not the same person either. But you're legally and socially bound to maintain a relationship with whoever these future strangers turn out to be, regardless of whether you actually like them or want to be around them. This is insane if you think about it clearly. You're signing a permanent contract based on temporary feelings about people who don't yet exist. The really cruel irony is that the men who feel most trapped are often the most responsible ones. The guys who take their commitment seriously, who try their best to be good husbands and fathers, who sacrifice their own needs consistently for the sake of their families. These men feel the trap most acutely precisely because they're the ones least likely to escape it. They have too much integrity to abandon their responsibilities. They have too much invested in being good men to walk away. So they endure, year after year, the weight of the trap getting heavier as time passes and options narrow, and the possibility of a different life fades into impossibility. Women often don't understand this because their experience of marriage is fundamentally different. For most women, marriage represents security, partnership, family, Social status. These are generally positive additions to their lives. Yes, they sacrifice some freedom and independence, but they gain things they actually value in return. For men, the calculation is different. What they gain, companionship and regular sex and a family, comes at the cost of almost everything else that made them feel alive and autonomous and powerful. It's not an even trade. It's not even close. But by the time most men realize this, they're already locked in with no good options for getting out. Schopenhauer believed that the highest wisdom was recognizing the futility of desire and achieving a kind of resignation, an acceptance of suffering that transcends it. The married man who has fully awakened to his situation faces a choice. He can continue to struggle against the trap, making himself and everyone around him miserable in the process. He can escape the trap through divorce, accepting the massive costs and consequences that come with that choice. Or he can achieve a kind of philosophical acceptance, recognizing the trap for what it is, but choosing to endure it with clear eyes and minimal expectations. None of these options are particularly appealing, which is why most men never reach this point of clarity. They stay in denial, in distraction, in the comfortable lie that everything is fine. The sexual decline in long-term marriages deserves special attention because it's both a symptom and a cause of the larger trap. The beginning, sex is frequent and passionate. Both partners desire each other intensely, but over time, for most couples, the frequency decreases, the passion fades, and sex becomes another chore on the list, something that happens when both people have energy and time and aren't too stressed or tired or angry with each other. For men, whose sexual desire typically remains higher and more consistent than women's, this decline is experienced as a form of slow starvation. He's committed to sexual monogamy with a partner who's increasingly uninterested in sex. He can't pursue other partners without destroying his life. He can't even acknowledge his frustration without being labeled as selfish or sex-obsessed. So he suffers quietly, his sexual vitality slowly dying. Another piece of himself sacrificed to the marriage. The financial servitude aspect cannot be overstated. The married man works not primarily for himself, but for the household, for his wife's lifestyle expectations, for his children's needs and wants, for the mortgage and the car payments and the college fund and the retirement account, and the endless stream of expenses that come with maintaining a middle-class family. He can't take risks with his career because other people depend on his income. He can't pursue passion projects that might not be profitable because the bills need to be paid. He can't downshift to a less stressful job because the family has gotten used to a certain standard of living. His labor, his time, his energy, all of it is being extracted to serve purposes that he didn't choose and might not even agree with if he was being honest. Schopenhauer saw money as a form of crystallized will, the power to satisfy desires converted into a portable abstraction. For the married man, this crystallized will is constantly being drained away to satisfy other people's desires, while his own go unmet. He works to pay for a house his wife chose. He works to pay for activities his children want to do. He works to maintain a lifestyle that's supposed to demonstrate his success, but actually just demonstrates how completely his life has been taken over by obligations he can never fully satisfy. The money flows through him, but is never really his. He's just a conduit, a mechanism for converting labor into resources that other people consume. The loss of identity is perhaps the most existentially disturbing aspect of the trap. Before marriage, a man is an individual with his own interests, goals, dreams, and identity. After marriage, especially after children, he becomes primarily a role: husband, father, provider. His individual self gets subsumed into these functional identities. When people ask about him, they ask about his family. When he introduces himself, he mentions his wife and kids, his own characteristics, his own passions, his own personality. These become secondary to his function within the family unit. And slowly, imperceptibly, he starts to forget who he was before all of this. The individual man gets erased and replaced with the family man, and he's supposed to celebrate this erasure as maturity and growth. There's a reason why so many men throw themselves into work, into hobbies, into anything that gives them a sense of individual achievement and identity, separate from their family role. They're desperately trying to hold on to some piece of themselves that hasn't been absorbed into the marriage. But even this escape is limited and controlled. The time he spends on himself is always borrowed time, always time that could have been spent with family, always time that needs to be justified and defended. His wife doesn't have this problem to the same degree. Her identity as a mother is celebrated and supported. His identity as anything other than a provider and father is seen as a distraction from his real responsibilities. Schopenhauer argued that compassion, the ability to recognize the suffering in others and respond to it, was the foundation of morality. But marriage often erodes a man's capacity for self-compassion. He's taught to ignore his own suffering, to minimize his own needs, to accept his own unhappiness as the price of being a good man. He extends endless compassion to his wife, listening to her problems, supporting her emotionally, helping her through difficulties. He extends compassion to his children, putting their needs first, sacrificing for their benefit. But he's not allowed to extend that same compassion to himself. If he did, if he actually acknowledged and honored his own suffering, the entire structure would become untenable. So he hardens himself against his own pain, develops a kind of callousness toward his own inner life that allows him to keep functioning in a situation that's slowly destroying him. The narrative around male privilege and toxic masculinity has made it even harder for men to talk about feeling trapped in marriage. If a man expresses unhappiness, he's immediately told to check his privilege, to recognize how much harder things are for women, to stop complaining about having to do basic adult responsibilities. The cultural conversation has no space for acknowledging that men might be suffering in gender-specific ways, that the structures of marriage and family might extract different costs from men than from women, that male unhappiness might be valid and worthy of attention rather than dismissal and mockery. So men stay silent, knowing that speaking up will only bring judgment and accusations rather than understanding or support. The children complicate everything in ways that are both beautiful and terrible. Men often find genuine meaning and purpose in fatherhood, in raising and shaping the next generation. This can be one of the few genuinely rewarding aspects of married life. But children also cement the trap. You can leave a wife, however costly that might be. You can't leave your children, or at least you can't without being a monster. So even men who would otherwise escape the marriage stay because they can't bear the thought of being separated from their kids, or becoming weekend dads who miss most of their children's lives. The love they feel for their children becomes another bar in the cage, perhaps the strongest one of all. Schopenhauer believed that the world was fundamentally irrational, driven by blind will rather than reason or purpose. Marriage proves this daily. Rationally, two people committing to a permanent exclusive relationship based on feelings that will inevitably change makes no sense. Rationally, organizing your entire life around the needs of people who didn't ask to be born and will eventually leave anyway makes no sense. Rationally, sacrificing decades of your one finite existence to maintain social structures that don't actually serve your individual well-being makes no sense. But we do it anyway because we're driven by forces deeper than reason. Biology, social conditioning, the desperate human need to believe that there's some way to avoid the essential loneliness and meaninglessness of existence. The married man who sees all of this clearly, who understands the trap and his position in it, faces a profound spiritual crisis. He can't go back to innocent belief in the marriage myth. He can't unsee what he's seen. But he also can't easily escape or change his situation. He's stuck in a state of conscious suffering, aware of his chains but unable or unwilling to break them. This is a kind of hell that our culture doesn't acknowledge or have any framework for addressing. We have support for people leaving bad marriages. We have support for people trying to improve their marriages. We have nothing for people who are stuck in marriages that are neither bad enough to leave nor good enough to be genuinely fulfilling. The health consequences of this chronic stress and unhappiness are real and measurable. Married men die younger than their unmarried peers when the marriage is unhappy. They have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety. The constant low-level stress of navigating a difficult marriage, of suppressing your own needs, of managing conflicts and expectations and obligations. This takes a physiological toll. Your body is literally being worn down by the trap. But men don't seek help for this because seeking help would mean admitting there's a problem. And admitting there's a problem would mean confronting all the things they've been trying not to think about for years. Schopenhauer's philosophy offers a bleak kind of comfort here. If life is suffering, if satisfaction is always temporary, if desire always renews itself, then the married man's unhappiness isn't a personal failure. It's not that he chose the wrong person or didn't try hard enough or lacks the character to be happy. It's that he's experiencing the fundamental nature of existence, just in a particularly concentrated and inescapable form. Marriage doesn't create suffering out of nothing. It just channels the suffering that would exist anyway into a very specific set of patterns and constraints. The question then becomes not how to escape suffering, because that's impossible, but how to relate to it. The married man can rage against his situation, making himself and everyone around him miserable. He can deny it, staying in delusion until it kills him. Or he can accept it with clear eyes, recognizing the trap, but choosing how he responds to it. This third option, what Schopenhauer might call resignation or what Buddhism calls acceptance, doesn't make the trap go away, but it might make it bearable. It might allow a man to find moments of peace and even meaning within the constraints, not by pretending the constraints don't exist, but by accepting them as the reality within which he has to operate. Some men find this acceptance through work, throwing themselves into their careers and finding identity and purpose there. Some find it through fatherhood, deriving meaning from shaping their children's lives. Some find it through hobbies, carving out small domains where they still have autonomy and control. Some find it through affairs, creating secret spaces where they can feel desired and alive again, even if just temporarily. Some find it through substance use, numbing the pain enough to keep functioning. None of these solutions are perfect. All of them are compromises. But they're the compromises that allow many men to endure what would otherwise be unendurable. The deepest tragedy might be that the institution that's supposed to prevent loneliness often creates it instead. The married man is surrounded by people, wife and children and extended family, but he's often more fundamentally alone than he ever was when he was single. He can't share his real thoughts and feelings. He can't be fully himself. He's performing a role, playing a part, managing impressions. The intimacy that marriage promises rarely survives the reality of daily life, the accumulation of resentments and disappointments, the erosion of mystery and desire. He ends up living with people who know him superficially but don't really understand him, can't understand him, because he's not allowed to show them who he really is. Look, here's what I want you to understand from everything I've told you today. The married man's trap isn't about individual failure. It's not about choosing the wrong person or having the wrong attitude. It's about a fundamental mismatch between what marriage promises and what it actually delivers, especially for men. Schopenhauer saw through the romantic mythology to the biological and social forces underneath, and what he saw wasn't pretty. But seeing clearly, even when what you see is uncomfortable, is better than living in delusion. You've stayed with me through this entire exploration, and that tells me you're someone who values truth over comfort. You're not afraid to look at difficult realities, to question narratives that everyone else accepts without thinking. That's rare. That's valuable. Drop a comment right now with this phrase, "I see the trap." Just those 4 words. Let me know you were here, that you heard this message, that you're part of the small percentage of people willing to confront uncomfortable truths. This isn't just about engagement or algorithm metrics. This is about building a community of people who think critically about the structures that shape our lives. When you leave that comment, you're identifying yourself as someone who refuses to sleepwalk through existence, and that matters more than you might realize. Now hit that subscribe button and smash the like. This isn't just supporting a channel. This is supporting a space where we can talk about things that most platforms won't touch, where we can examine ideas that make people uncomfortable, where we can pursue truth wherever it leads without apologizing for what we find. Every subscription, every like, every share tells the algorithm that there's an audience for this kind of unfiltered philosophical exploration. You're not just consuming content. You're participating in pushing back against a culture that wants to keep men specifically from thinking too carefully about their own lives and choices. There's something coming in the next video that's going to make what we talked about today look tame by comparison. I'm going to show you something about the nature of power and relationships that will fundamentally change how you see every interaction you have. The people who understand what I'm about to reveal operate on a completely different level than everyone else. They see patterns that others miss. They navigate reality with a clarity that seems almost supernatural. You need to be here for that. You need to understand what I'm about to share. Stay subscribed because missing this next piece would be like reading half a book and thinking you understand the whole story.